Hello everyone, I'm Arunima from Knit and Otter, and in this video I'm going to show you how to make neat edges in Tunisian crochet. So whenever somebody starts learning Tunisian crochet, there's one thing that I've seen that the struggle with is keeping their edges nice and neat. So there are a few tricks that you can use to make your edges neat, and I'm going to share with you now. Uh, let's begin with this edge. So this is the edge which is closer to your crocheting hand. And if you see here, there is these V's that line up, and it's almost like a chain, but to make sure that they are of even tension. So whenever we begin a row in Tunisian crochet, this is the loop on the hook that counts as the first stitch. So this will become the edge stitch, and we need to make sure that this is the same tension as the rest. I'm going to begin by telling you what usually happens. So this is a swatch of simple stitches, and that's what I'm going to use for this tutorial. So you make a few simple stitches. And you can see how whenever we are working our stitches, this hook is constantly pulling on this one loop here, and that is why it usually ends up becoming loose. So it constantly keeps pulling on it, and because these stitches in Tunisian crochet are all connected to each other, this gets pulled, which becomes extra loose, but the rest, these stitches become tighter. So that is why, because they're connected, it just pulls the yarn towards the first stitch, and that is because you're constantly moving this hook like this. So one thing that you can do at this point when you have like a few stitches on your hook is when you can pull them up like this, and that sort of evens the yarn out in all the stitches and makes them all the same height. But you would normally be working with more than just a few stitches, so this won't always work. So the next thing that you can do is you can use a stitch marker and take, so I have 4 loops on the hook. I'm going to take the first 3 and I'm going to put a stitch marker there. I'm going to remove all of these from the hook, and I'm going to put this one stitch without the marker back on. So I've saved these 3 loops here, and I'm going to continue making the rest of my row as I normally would. And here I am completing the return pass up until the point where the stitch marker is there. So now that I have this, I'm going to remove this return pass yarn. I'm going to pull these 3 stitches back onto the hook. And I'm going to bring the return pass yarn back as well. I'm going to remove the stitch marker now, and I'm going to now complete the return pass. So what this does is that we are now making, so in this case, the 4th stitch as the first stitch that keeps getting pulled on, and that saves this first stitch at the same height that it was originally when we put that on when we put it on the hook. So the height of this doesn't change, and even if this one gets a little loose, that's okay. As I said, these all are connected. When you make the next row, you won't even notice the difference in this. It's usually the first stitch which gets noticed the most because it's the edge stitch. So if you can move those out of the way and then complete the rest of the row and then pull these back on, that will help significantly with keeping this edge straight. So that's for this edge. Now let's talk about the other one. So I'm going to go ahead and make simple stitches all the way until 1 stitch before the edge stitch. So here I am. So the place where we have to make our edge stitch is always on top of the edge stitch of the previous row. So here in the previous row, here is the edge stitch, and if you turn this sideways, you'll see that every edge stitch has a V, an upside down V. So here this, and for the last row, it's this and this right here. So you have to pick up both of these, and that's where you'll make your edge stitch. So insert your hook and pick up both of those and yarn over, pull through. So that is where you make your edge stitch, and that when you pull up this loop, just make sure it's the same height as the rest. It uh, on this edge, the stitch tends to be a little bit tight, so I always make sure to pull it a little extra, just to have that. So the tension might be even here, but your left and right edges might become uneven. So just pull it a tiny bit to make sure that it's the same height as the rest of the stitches. And then you chain one and then yarn over, pull through two, all the way to the beginning to complete this row. So that's how it will look after you complete the row. Now, what happens a lot of times is that this edge stitch becomes hard to identify because this here and the stitch right next to it, which is this one, they look very similar. So I'm going to show you what I mean exactly. So I'm here at one stitch before the edge stitch. Now, if you look at this, a lot of times what happens is that people end up picking these mistakenly instead of these, which I've seen very often actually, and it's hard in the beginning when you're just learning. So when you don't understand exactly how the Tunisian crochet works, with time this will make a lot more sense. But if you're just beginning, then there is something that you can do to identify this. So when you're making your swatch, you will start with the foundation row, so this will be easy to find in the foundation row. So if this were the foundation row and you had picked up the edge stitch, yarn over, pull through, you can use a stitch marker and put it through this loop, the last one that you just added, and around that working yarn, and close it. So that is how it looks. And you yarn over, chain one, and then yarn over, pull through two. So this is how it is. And if you see that here, this is exactly where you need to insert your hook next time you're trying to make an edge stitch. So I'm going to show you how it works. So I'm making simple stitches until one stitch before the edge. And then here, just insert your hook where that stitch marker is and remove the stitch marker, yarn over, pull through, and that's your edge stitch. And then you take a stitch marker back and put it through this last loop here and the working yarn, and then chain one and yarn over, pull through two, yarn over, pull through two until the beginning. So here we go. This is how it is, and you can keep using the stitch marker for as long as you want. After practice, after a lot of practice, and once you understand Tunisian crochet better and how these stitches work, then it will be easy to identify the edge stitch, and you can then work without a stitch marker if you want to, but use the stitch marker for as long as you need to, and you should be able to get these neat edges. So on this side, it is about keeping the tension even, and this side is about finding the right place to insert your hook. Those are the most common issues I've found that people who are new to Tunisian crochet have, and hopefully this was helpful. And if you have any questions about this, feel free to reach out to me, and I will be happy to help you.